Hey, it's me again, and I'm back with the fourth and final part of my very quick series about what the components you need to put together a book. And I spoke about how you needed a narrative. That's the list of things that happen to your characters. The most important element there is the fact that your characters' behaviors should be driven by their motivations, their emotions. You should have characters who are so well established the story kind of writes itself, because once you throw these characters into the situation and once they meet each other, their needs must be so clearly defined in your own head that you know how the character is going to act, and that's how you can create your narrative. And the second video, I'll talk about story and how storytelling is a very underappreciated craft, but it is what elevates whatever thing you are creating to the next level. And I recommended looking up things like Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, Dan Harmon's Story Circle, Romance Beats, there's Save the Cat, all sorts of storytelling guides. And most of them will cover the same sort of structure to it, but having that structure is really, really important. And putting your narrative into the structure of a story is what is really going to make the difference to whatever you are trying to create. But there is a final element, which is writing. And it's funny because when it comes to narrative and story, those things you can use in anything. You can use them in movies, you can use them in TV shows, in video games. But writing obviously is something that is specific to books. And I think a lot of people, again, don't appreciate the significance of the choices you make when you write. And what I mean by that is, it's actually a really good, easy way to give an example. So this is the first book I ever wrote. I used to be able to boast that I'd never sold a single copy of it, but actually I have sold like a dozen. I think it's 13, and I published this 13 years ago, so one a year. Wow. And it was all within the last couple of weeks. But when I wrote this book, I had a very definite agenda in my head. I was like, I want to write a good old-fashioned adventure story like the ones I wrote. So I made choices in how I wrote it that at the time I didn't even think were choices. So I wrote this in third person, which means, so if I take a segment, it's like Eddie gazed down into her big grey eyes. So you talk third person as in you're writing as an external observer. And I wrote it focused largely on the main character, who was Eddie, and then occasionally you'd go and you'd see things from other characters' points of view. And the reason I did that is because at the time I didn't even think of doing it any other way, because I'm a guy, I got raised reading a lot of different types of books, but the books that I tended to read tended to be written in third person. And the books that really made an impact to me, like the Saint books and James Bond and the Jilly Cooper books and Fiona Walker's books, those are all written in third person. So I just thought that's the way you did it. And it's interesting going through my writing journey, because as I started to delve into self-publishing and I moved into romance, the first couple of romance books I wrote, I also wrote in third person, and they didn't do very well. And the solution to that was to start reading as many romance books as I could, and as many books that were in the same sort of category as I was aiming to get into. And immediately I could see what my problem was, because contemporary romance, especially like romantic suspense and the kind of books that I write, tend to be written in first person perspective. So instead of Eddie did this, it would be I did this, because you are basically telling it from the perspective of the narrator. And also they tend to have alternating points of view, which is something that doesn't exist massively outside of romance in such a structured way. But I love it. Alternating points of view means you'll have the first chapter will be written from the hero's perspective, and the second chapter will be written from the heroine's perspective, or vice versa. And I wrote a book like that, and it changed my life. It was I was writing MMA books about mixed martial artists and this big fighting league and stuff like that. And I had an idea in my head what the story was going to be. And previously, I'd written it in third person, maybe focusing on a different character each chapter. But then I wrote it in first person. I wrote it with the alternating points of view, and as soon as I'd got into it, I was like, this is a better way to tell the story. I can see now why romance readers like stories written like this, because I spoke about how one of the important things when you're constructing a story is to try and find the emotional hooks You're trying to take people on an emotional journey, and first-person perspective it's like a cheat code, because when you say like Eddie was unhappy, that is just a statement. Whereas you say I was unhappy, it's almost like subliminal. By reading I was unhappy, you kind of feel unhappy yourself, because that's the way the mind works. So it's a really, really good way to tell a story, and I enjoy it. And I go on about how the fact that, you know, I found my voice by writing romance, because the stories I want to tell, that are like the old-fashioned adventure stories that I wrote here, when you tell them in the format of a romance book, and you tell them first-person perspective with alternating points of view, there are many different choices you have to make. You have to bring a female character to the forefront, and they just make it a better book. And I loved it, because I really found my voice, and everything I wrote was better from there. But more importantly, the sales were better. It was literally one of the things that changed everything for me, was doing the research to find out what style of writing people in my categories were using. And once I adopted that and used that, everything changed for me, and my book started selling in much larger numbers, and that's how I ended up becoming a successful author. So yeah, writing is a really, really important part of what you're doing. And when you're sitting down trying to put together a book, and you've got your narrative of what happens in it, and hopefully you like put it into a story circle, so you kind of follow a traditional story, then don't gloss over the significance of how you write it, the style you write it. Do you write it in present tense, in past tense? Do you write it first person? Do you write it third person? Figure out, just like in that video I made about how you have to figure out, you know, what the covers look like in the books you're trying to compete with. Figure out what the books that you want your book to be seen alongside use in terms of writing, because that is going to basically make your book belong there. And it's really, really important. It shows your readers that, you know, you appreciate their genre, and you respect what it is they like and expect in a book. It makes a huge difference. But it doesn't make all the difference, I just want to say. As I said in my video about storytelling, your story is the most important element. And you can have a book that is beautifully written, but if the story's bad, it's not going to resonate with people, and it's not going to become popular. Whereas if you have a book that the writing is less than optimal, shall we say, but the story is really, really strong, then it can still become massively popular. And I always use the example of Twilight, because, you know, the writing in Twilight isn't necessarily the greatest writing ever. However, it does what writing is supposed to do. Writing is a craft, not an art. Writing is a craft, and it has a purpose to communicate what happens. And, you know, the writing is good enough to communicate what happens, and the story is structured strongly enough to really resonate with people. And that's why Twilight was massively successful, even though it's not necessarily the best written book. And there are tons and tons of books in literary fiction which are beautifully written. The words are just you know, sublimely put together, but because they don't follow the rigid structure of like a romance book or a thriller or something like that, they don't resonate as easily with readers. And the best writing in the world isn't going to get over that road bump. So writing is something you should take very, very seriously, but it's not the most important thing. Your story is. So, you know, definitely do your research. Definitely identify what type of writing your readers are going to expect to encounter, and definitely try and become the best writer you can. And make those choices like first person, third person, past tense, present tense. But at the end of the day, if you only have a limited amount of mental energy to focus on anything, focus on the story. But there we go. This is a very, very brief overview, and I'm sure I'm going to go into all of these different aspects. But those are the three key elements: narrative, story, writing. And in terms of importance, story always comes number one. Writing is what is really going to elevate you in terms of your connection with the readers, and narrative should always be driven by the motivations of the characters, not by your plot. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I made this video for Jack Austin, who's been a supporter of this channel right from the very beginning. Jack, let me know how I did. I know this is kind of high level, and let me know if there's anything additional you want me to dig into. I'm probably going to dig into all of them. I really want to go right into how to construct a story. I think that's exciting, and I'll spend a lot of time doing that. But I just wanted to put these videos together because you have been such a great support of this channel, and you've been asking that question a number of times, and I wanted to just show you that I respect you enough to cover that as an issue. Anyway, I will chat to you guys later. Thank you very much for watching. What is it? Subscribe, hit that like bell, notification, something. I don't do what you want. But I will speak to you soon. Ciao.